Thrustmaster is about to launch a brand new limited edition version of their eSwap Pro controller, and this one is unlike any you've seen before. The officially licensed XR Forza Horizon 5 edition adorns a flashy new hot pink and grayscale paint scheme that we at Traxion unsurprisingly love, but the main attraction is the new racing module, which works, to all intents and purposes, as a steering wheel for your controller. Now, if you're a big racing game fan that has no intentions of buying a full-size wheel and pedal set, this may sound like something you've been dreaming of for years, but does it deliver the experience you've been waiting for? I'm going to tell you in this video. Of course, a big thank you to Thrustmaster for sending us this controller to review, and a reminder that, as with all our hardware reviews, all thoughts and opinions are our own, and you can check out our full review policy in the description below. The eSwap Pro controllers have a unique selling point in that they're fully customizable through swappable modules, hence the name. You can easily and quickly swap the D-pad and the analog's position, for example, or swap the grips on the side, or even mix up the look and feel of the triggers. Essentially what this means is you can lay out the controller in any way you like to suit your personal preference, and Thrustmaster has said that it will be bringing out new, updated modules in future, which could bring some more interesting ideas beyond the steering wheel. This new Horizon 5 edition is compatible, as you may have guessed, with the Xbox Series X and S, as well as the previous gen Xbox One and PC. Cost-wise, if you're in mainland Europe like Thrustmaster, you'd be looking at €199.99. If you're in the UK, it's £179.99, and over in the States, it's $179.99. So the best value is definitely for you guys over the pond. It's already available for pre-order and launches on Wednesday the 29th of March, the same day as the Rally Adventure DLC's arrival on Horizon 5, so that's a nice touch. It arrives in this sleek and nicely designed box, well packaged, all very secure in there. You also get this little Thrustmaster bag to keep your controller in. You of course get your cable, which is USB to micro USB. Sadly the controller's not wireless, so you will need to have it plugged in to actually use it. You get a little tool here to be able to extract the D-pad module. You get a quick start guide in multiple different languages, and of course you get your little racing steering wheel module. Before we get into that though, I want to talk about the controller when it's in its standard layout. How does it actually function? Now, straight off the bat, let me tell you, I do not have much experience with Pro controllers, and I'm not very good at the games you might normally expect to play with a regular Pro controller. It's a bit like that old phrase, give a fish the keys to the Red Bull RB19, and it probably can't tell you too much about its aerodynamic balance. Something like that. Regardless of that though, here are my thoughts. Now I have to say, when you first pick up the controller and touch the different areas of it, dare I say it feels a little bit cheap. The D-pad's probably the weakest culprit. It just feels a little bit wobbly. The buttons themselves do actually have a nice feel to them when you click them. The actuation's nice and positive. It just doesn't scream premium in my eyes. However, when you're actually holding the controller and using it while gaming, I have to say this does change. The controller feels really solid and weighty, slightly heavier than the standard controller. The grips on the side are nice, the magnetic pads comfortable over long periods of time. The bumpers are nice, have a nice actuation, very direct. The triggers as well have nice little grips on them, so that feels pretty good. Analog sticks are an improvement over a standard controller as well. I'm not going to get into all the details of concave and convex analog sticks and everything because I wouldn't really know much, but it does feel solid to me. The responsiveness of the inputs is very much noticeable when you then switch back to a regular controller. And I have to say, styling-wise as well, I think they've done a really good job. I think it's nice and flashy, it stands out, it's probably going to look good sitting next to your Xbox. On the back of the controller, you'll also find 4 extra buttons which replace the D-pad when you're not using the D-pad module. You also have a couple of little sticks which adjust the depth of the trigger. Then along the bottom, you have volume controls, and you also have a couple of profiles and a map button, which you can actually set custom configurations and layouts using the Thrustmaster X software. I do think having a couple of custom profiles that are saved to your preference is really cool as well. You could have one saved for using the racing module and one saved for the regular controller layout. As well as allowing for the custom configuration, the software also allows you to adjust the analog sensitivity curves, it allows you to adjust dead zones, trigger calibrations, and vibration levels. Now, beyond the decent feel and the more than decent performance, I have to say the biggest selling point is of course the swappable modules. It means that if you suffer from stick drift or get any kind of other damage to your D-pad or analog sticks, you can just replace them with new ones, and that makes your controller last a lot longer. My overall basic assessment is that this is very stylish, it's very functional, if it feels a little bit below premium to touch. Now, as a channel focused on racing games, of course the real reason that we are testing this controller is because of the racing module. In other words, a steering wheel. I'm going to put it in the controller now. I'm going to tell you about how it feels to use. The steering wheel is essentially just a small dial. You've got a kind of serrated grippy edge going around the perimeter, which helps you keep in control and it prevents you from slipping off with your finger. You obviously control it with your thumb, that seems to be the natural thing to do. I've crashed into a digger. Now when you turn it, it's a completely smooth transition from one side to the other. There's no notchiness or anything like that. There's very little resistance as well. Of course, there's no force feedback or anything in this particular steering wheel because it is literally just a dial. But it does self-center if you let go of it. So it springs back to the middle. And that does give you an element of control, an element of very, very subtle resistance, if you like, which makes it feel a little bit more steering wheel-like. The amount of rotation you get to work with is 95 degrees, and that's limiting. I mean, it makes sense. It's the limitations of what is essentially an adapted analog stick to a degree, but it obviously doesn't give you anywhere near the same level of precision that you would get with a big steering wheel. So I'm currently pounding round this cross-country circuit on Forza Horizon 5 in my Subaru Impreza, and I have to say, I've really enjoyed my time with this controller so far. It's been fun to use. It's added something a little bit different, a little bit unique to my regular racing game experience with the controller. I've also given it a go on Need for Speed Unbound, which is another game I've been enjoying recently, and something a little bit more serious in terms of the physics with BeamNG.drive. And from all of those experiences, I've had more fun using this little wheel than I would have had with an analog stick. It's taken me a little bit of time to adapt and get comfortable, and I'm still not quite there yet, having spent a good few hours with it. But for sure, I'm having a lot of fun getting used to it, and it does feel a little bit more natural in the way that you can actually drive relative to normal with the analog stick. I'm going to go try a race in our Traxion Corvette. Now of course, with this being the eSwap controller with adaptable modules and customization options, Thrustmaster have given you two recommended layouts for where to use this racing module. You can use it at the bottom left there. You can also put it up to the top left. I mean, to be honest, you can put it anywhere, but that's the two that Thrustmaster recommend. BMW, get out of my way. I personally found that both feel okay. I do prefer it down towards the bottom, makes it a little bit more natural for where my thumb would sit. And you can also drive it with different techniques as well. You can either have your thumb at the top of the dial, basically pulling down on it left or right to turn the car, which is a slightly more natural way to use a steering wheel. The other thing you can do, however, is steer from the bottom, essentially pulling the dial up to the left or the right. And it obviously creates a slightly different feeling, and you have to use a different type of force, but it also works pretty well. The only thing is though, it can sometimes get a little bit confusing when you do this. Like for example, because you're actually kind of pulling left to turn the car right, because you're pulling the dial from the bottom, sometimes you find that when you want to make a quick correction and turn to the left, you end up shooting off the circuit to the right, which isn't exactly ideal. I haven't found my preferred style yet. Both of them have been fine, both of them have been comfortable. I haven't quite settled on one or the other yet. One thing I can say as well though is that it's taken a little bit of time to be able to get precise, because obviously having a dial or steering wheel instead of an analog stick should give you that little bit more control of the amount of steering you're putting in. But it is still tricky, it's still difficult to be precise because you don't have that much feeling in it at all. You're essentially taking a guess at it, and you have to be so careful with the amount that you put in, because of course being 95 degrees rather than 900 degrees, the amount that you put into the steering is a lot more than it would be in a steering wheel relatively, if that makes any sense. So you just turn a tiny little bit on this steering wheel here, and your wheels in the car will turn a lot. However, as you can see, fairly quickly with this thing, you begin to find it just as natural as you do an analog stick. And I've been playing racing games with an analog stick for probably almost 20 years now, and I've been playing with this one for only a couple of days. No! Oh my goodness, that was close. Well, at least that's one victory. I think one of the biggest issues I've had with this so far is when you need to make quick decisions and quick movements either left or right. So for example, in Need for Speed Unbound, if you're facing oncoming traffic in one of these high-speed races, it can be a bit difficult to make those quick moves and be decisive. I found myself crashing into a lot of oncoming traffic and landscape on the side of the road. But it's actually the slower inputs that this steering wheel gives you the most control over. So when you're drifting on Forza Horizon 5, that is when I feel that this controller comes into its own. Now if I take my Ford Mustang to a drift zone, I have to say, and I'm usually not very good at drifting on Forza Horizon 5, having this steering wheel has made my life a whole lot easier with drifting, a whole lot more comfortable, a whole lot more natural. I find I can string together drifts with less incidents, I can get sideways, I can have that little bit more control, and because you're doing everything at a slightly slower speed, you don't have to worry about quick decision making in oncoming traffic. You can actually use that dial to your advantage. Normally when I'm drifting with an analog stick, I'm a little bit hit or miss, I'm a little bit all over the place. And with this, I have to say I've been able to pretty much 3-star every drift zone first attempt, which is something I wouldn't normally say that I could do straight away. it is more enjoyable as well. Get nice and close to the wall, a bit more power. You can just feather your inputs that little bit more precisely, less guesswork, and for me this is the best of this wheel, for sure. There we go, new PB, straight out the block. One thing I really do need to stress though, is that this steering wheel on this controller is far closer to an analog stick than it is to a proper steering wheel and pedal set. Now you might have already assumed that, but I'm just making sure that's very, very clear. Like, yes, you can control the car in a slightly more controlled manner, but it still feels far more like an analog stick, and you still can't make those split-second, microscopic changes that you can when you're using a proper wheel. And I have to say, having the wheel on the controller isn't without other compromises as well. Of course, using the recommended layout by replacing the D-pad with the steering wheel, you lose functionality of the D-pad. Now you do of course have the buttons on the back, which will act as a D-pad by default, but obviously it's not the same. You can't see them, they're not laid out in the same way, and you will get used to them, but what I'm trying to say is it does compromise the regular natural playability of the controller that you've become so used to, so it will definitely take some time to adapt to. Sure, you could say the racing module is a bit gimmicky, but it will have a small and positive impact on your potential driving performance. It's not entirely frivolous. The controller itself is responsive and purposeful, meaning that the eSwap Pro XR Forza Horizon 5 would be a tangible upgrade from a regular Xbox controller. Is it going to completely transform your hobby? No, of course not. But could it give you that little bit more control and make things that little bit more enjoyable? Probably. I do think the price is a little bit steep though. You'd have to be a passionate and regular player to get the most out of it. That being said, if you want something new and fun with the potential to give you a small edge over your mates, and you have the money to spend, then this ticks the boxes. Personally, I think it's a pretty cool gift idea for your actual kid rather than your inner kid. Just make sure if they ask you for a steering wheel for the racing games, you don't assume that they mean this. They might be a little bit disappointed. So that concludes our review of the Thrustmaster eSwap Pro XR Forza Horizon 5 Edition. I want to know what you think of it. Have you pre-ordered it? Are you watching this and you've already got it? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, subscribe to the Traxion channel for more hardware reviews like this in future, and plenty more that probably aren't like this, because this one's pretty unique. Until next time, thank you for watching, keep it pinned, and have a great day.